Welcome to you all. Today we will discuss the chapter number 2 from unit number 4 of a pharmacy practice entitled as a clinical pharmacy. So before moving of a discussion, we need to highlight the learning objectives for our concerned area. So the learning objective will be being categorized into two important components. In the first component, we are going to discuss the introduction of a clinical pharmacy, concept of the clinical pharmacy, functions and the responsibility of a clinical pharmacist, drug therapy monitoring, medication chart review, clinical review, pharmacist intervention. In second component, we are going to discuss the all-round participation, medication history and the pharmaceutical care, dosing pattern and the drug therapy based upon the pharmacokinetic and the disease pattern. So dear learners, first of all we need to discuss the introduction to the clinical pharmacy, where we need to highlight the definition of a clinical pharmacy is defined as the branch of a pharmaceutical sciences which deals with the utilization of a pharmacist's knowledge, skill and his judgment related with the biomedical and pharmaceutical sciences to prove the safety, the cost and the precision of the drug uses in the patient care. For clinical pharmacy will be considered as a modern and extended field of a pharmacy. Based upon the American Journal of a Clinical Pharmacy, the clinical pharmacy is defined as the discipline that embodies the application and the development of a scientific principles of a pharmacology by pharmacists in terms of a pharmacology, toxicology, therapeutics and the clinical pharmacokinetics, along with the pharmacoeconomics, pharmacogenomics and other allied science of a care for the patient. In the lateral discussion of introduction to the pharmacy, we need to highlight the developmental condition of a clinical pharmacy. So in a developed countries like USA, Canada, the clinical pharmacy has already taken a very good shape, but in India still now it is in an infancy stage and very few organizations are working in that particular direction. The role of a retail pharmacist is viewed by many people as a simply transforming the pills from the large bottle to the smaller one. We are just counting the tablets, typing the labels and calculating the price. India stands among top 15 in the world in a pharmaceutical market with respect to the pharmaceutical production, export and import, but still the clinical pharmacy is in an infancy stage in our country. There is still a need to develop the concept of the clinical pharmacy in our country. Today there is a drug explosion and the information explosion in related with the drugs. On one hand, there is a development of a newer and more effective drugs, and on the other hand, there is a potential hazardous of the side effects which has been arise because of the drug explosion. So for that particular reason, we need to we need to shape up the actual role of a clinical pharmacist in our country. In this section, we need to learn the concept of the clinical pharmacy. Clinical pharmacy is an emerged as the latest branch of a pharmacy in the 21st of a century. It is where a pharmacist deals with the various aspects of the patient care, dispensing of the drug, advising the patient on the safe and the rational use of the medication. It can also be explained as a part of a pharmacy in which the clinical pharmacist provides a patient care that optimizes the use of a medication and promotes the health, wellness and the disease prevention. In this section, we need to highlight the different areas where the clinical pharmacy will reaches. So the clinical pharmacist is also actively perform the medication therapy management that we are already discussed in our previous talk. Then it is also responsible for the pharmacotherapy therapy consult over the phone. Then updating and compiling all the medication, mainly including the OTC medication. Clinical pharmacy is also responsible for the safe surveillance of the medication. It is also responsible for addressing the adherence and the compliance concern related with the patient non-compliance issue. Then clinical pharmacy is also looking after the disease management support. Clinical pharmacy is also responsible for the health, wellness and immunization related activities which has been carried out at the NGO level. Then clinical pharmacy is also responsible for compiling a personal medication list and a medication action plan for the patient and their prescribers. Dear friend, we are also need to discuss the most important part from the introduction to the clinical pharmacy, that is nothing but the functions and the responsibility of a clinical pharmacist. So as a clinical pharmacist, they are responsible for assessing the patient health problems and determine whether prescription prescribed medication are optimally meet the patient needs or not. They are also responsible to evaluate the appropriateness and effectiveness of the medication to the patient. They are also responsible for recognizing the untreated health problem. They are also responsible for follow up the patient programs to determine the effects of a patient medication. They also carried out the consult with the patient physician and other healthcare providers in selection of a medication therapy for the patient. They are responsible for to advise the patient on how to take a best or how to take a medication in the best possible manner. Then they are also responsible to support the healthcare team efforts to educate the patient on other important aspects and to improve the medication management therapy process. They are also responsible for to refer the patient to his or her physician or other healthcare profession to address the specific health problem or the wellness. So these are the some important functions which has been performed by the clinical pharmacist. So dear friend, this is just a graphical presentation that we are already discussed in our previous slide related with the role of a clinical pharmacist. So when you are talking about the role of a clinical pharmacist, it has been categorized into three important segments. The first one is a patient centric, second one is a organization centric, and third one is a global role. So patient centric role, we are already discussed that they are responsible for the patient education, drug interactions screening, drug therapy monitoring, medication management process, drug disease management, pharmacogenetics, drug information related activity. Basically, they are also responsible for performing certain organization related functions like a protocol, guideline, policy development, research, clinical research, then core measures and the quality improvement initiatives, formulary management, medication safety protocols. Then when you are talking about the global role, they are responsible for the governmental and societal communities and agendas. They are the part of that particular communities. They are also responsible for framework of societal guidelines and the policy development. They are also responsible for the legal consultation and the public health initiatives. Now the next thing that we need to discuss, the drug therapy monitoring versus the therapeutic drug monitoring. So these are the two equally or equilibrium terminologies, but they having a different kind of a work role. So we need to discuss all of this. And the clinical pharmacy is responsible for the drug therapy monitoring. So what is the therapeutic drug monitoring? We are already discussed in our previous talk, that where we are going to assess the patient related with the different conditions like pharmacokinetic variability, adverse drug or therapeutic effect related to the concentration, the narrow therapeutic index, to identify the nanotherapeutic index, undefined therapeutic concern, desired therapeutic effects. We will also assess the patient for the drug that the patient has taken, like anti-cancer, immunosuppressive, cardiac drug, anti-epileptic, bronchodilators, psychotics, and antibiotic related drug. Then we will check in a therapeutic drug monitoring, we will check the certain kinds of a matrix like a plasma, blood, urine, serum, with the help of a certain technical instrumentation like HPLC, GCMS, immunoassays, and the biosensor. So this much of activity that we are going to perform in a therapeutic drug monitoring. But on another hand, drug therapy monitoring is only an interaction that made between the clinical pharmacist and a patient. So that is called as an intervening program, where we are going to take a data, and this data will match with the data which has been obtained during the drug therapeutic monitoring for designing the optimal drug therapy for the patient. So drug therapy monitoring. So in a drug therapy monitoring, where a patient is actively review the pharmacist actively review the patient profiling records, identifying and resolve the patient problems related with certain issues like adverse drug event related issue, communicated with the prescribers. Then pharmacists educate the patient, that we are already discussed. They are also responsible for monitoring the routine data or the routine condition of the patient. Then patient responses to the medications are very complex, so based upon that one, complexity has been increases. So in a drug therapeutic monitoring, the pharmacist is handling to that particular section, which is a very complex kind of activity. So these are the certain important functions which has been performed by the pharmacist monitoring. there are the different steps which has been involved in a drug therapy monitoring and medication chart review that we need to discuss in this section. So the first important step in a drug therapy monitoring is nothing but what matters to the patient. So during the medication chart review, the first thing that going to assess is nothing but by the pharmacist that what is being prioritized to the patient. So identifying the aim and objectives of the drug therapy by asking the patient what matters to you, explain any key information such as the laboratory markers, establishment or treatment objective with the patient through a shared decision making. Then the step number 2 is nothing but to identify the need or essentiality of a drug therapy. So to emphasizes on the most important thing why this drug therapy is essential for the patient. So the separate list of the drug which has been which the patient is taking ensure that the patient understand the importance of the essential drug therapy. All medications, whether the herbal, prescribed or the traditional remedies should be included into this section. In step number 3, again it is a need where we need to understand does the patient is taken unnecessary drug therapy or not. So to understand unnecessary drug therapy, and based upon that they will going to prepare a drug efficacy plan or a table for the patient. So in assessing the drug therapy for the patient, they are going to check for the patient remaining drugs. It should be verified that each has been a function in achieving the therapeutic goal and the outcome that matters to the patient. Review the preventative treatment to ensure the patient is able to continue the taking a medication for the required time and to gain the more benefit. In step 4, they are going to check the effectiveness, are the therapeutic objective being achieved or not. Check the treatment choices is the most effective to achieve the intended outcomes. If it is not in the case, the possibility of a patient non-adherence should be being investigated as a potential explanation. Otherwise, there is a need for the dose titration may be also considered. 50% of the patient taking 4 or more medication does not take them as a prescribed. So this is the data as per the WHO. So if someone is on a multiple drug therapy, we need to review the patient for their health condition. So step number 5 is the patient is a risk for adverse drug reaction. So to understand the patient actuals, if any patient is actually suffering from any kind of adverse event or adverse drug event, so the presence of adverse drug reaction can sometimes be identified from the laboratory data. For example, hypokalemia, which may be occurs because of excessive use of diuretics. Then the patient may report such kind of symptoms including drug-drug or drug-disease interaction, but also the patient ability to the self-medicate. Ask the patient to the specification, that is about the presence of anticholinergic symptoms, dizziness or drowsiness. If patient is experiencing the ADRs, use a yellow card reporting form, that is nothing but adverse drug reporting form which is being available at the different locations of the hospital. Then step number 6 is associated with the efficacy, where we are going to assess is the drug is cost effective or not. So identify the cost effectiveness of the drug. So opportunities for the cost minimization should be explored, but changing the drug for the cost region should only be considered if the effectiveness, safety or adherence could not be compromised at all. Ensure the prescribing is in the line with the current formulary recommendation which is available for that particular. So the last step of a medication chart review is nothing but the patient centric activity, where we are going to find out is the patient is willing to take a drug therapy as intended or not. Does the patient is understanding the outcomes of the review of the therapy or not. Ensuring the drug therapy is tailored to the patient preferences. Then pharmacist intervention. So intervention made by the pharmacists have always been considered as a value input by the health community or healthcare community in the patient care processes by reducing the medication error, rationalizing the therapy and reducing the cost of therapy. So the role of a pharmacist has been diversified from the dispensing of a medication to the patient care that we are already discussed. Now if previously we are the just and counselor handler, but now we will consider ourselves as the patient counselor, patient healthcare educator, community service service giver to the clinical practice. So the Joint Commission on Accreditation of a Healthcare Organization, JACO, has recommended that all the prescription must be reviewed by the pharmacist before dispensing, and stressed that outcome should be documented as a result of a direct patient care by the pharmacy. So, we will give a definitely respectable position in pharmacy practice or clinical pharmacy practice procedure, where every medication or every prescription will be reviewed by the pharmacist. Then intervention by the pharmacist is warranted to detect this medication therapy problem, after which the solution for this problem can be invented or the drug therapy optimized for each patient. This intervention has been developed by time to time, and their forms and vary from the simplest handwriting to the computerized databases, that is called as a online prescription. So, to understand pharmacist intervention, I would like to present here certain kinds of regimen. So, first regimen that we will need to discuss is the vancomycin administration. So, how there is an intervention made in that particular section, we will discuss here. So, what happened? The first the procedure where a doctor decided to administer the vancomycin to the patient. So, pharmacists collect the patient characteristics like age, weight and gender. Pharmacists calculate based upon patient parameters like a creatine clearance and estimated optimal initial dose using vancomycin therapeutic drug monitoring software. The pharmacists communicate with the doctors and offering the VCM regimen. The therapeutic drug monitoring confirming VCM blood level within the therapeutic range and presence and absence of a renal dysfunction at least for 3 days after the vancomycin therapy initiation. If necessary, there is a need to adjust the dose, and if there is a no need to adjust the dose, pharmacist will continue to monitor and communicate the doctor. So, it include pharmacist intervention includes certain procedure. It's always started from the prescription writing by the doctor, then patient information, then biochemical estimation by the pharmacist, communication made by the pharmacist, then therapeutic drug monitoring, and final documentation. So, these are the intervention stages which has been performed. It always started with the prescription writing by the physician. So, here the prescription has been written by the physician, but what kind of a dose is required, that has been to be monitored, that has been to be calculated by the pharmacist, and based upon that particular dose will be given to the patient. So, where a pharmacist will take a active participation in a dose decision or dose decision making or the therapy decision making, that is called as a pharmacist intervention. Then next important thing that we need to discuss is the ward round participation. So, ward round participation is nothing but it is a interdisciplinary team rounds are dedicated interactions that occurs on a regular basis, ongoing basis throughout the patient stay within the physician and other members of a pharmaceutical team or care team, healthcare team, which may include the nurses, physical therapists, pharmacists, case manager, family members and the caretakers. ITT rounds are become more common because they built a strong foundation for the care coordination that is essential to success in value based care model. Medical, nursing and other allied health clinicians works in the medical world environment that requires a communication and coordinated teamwork to deliver a safe, quality and cost effective patient care. Patient involved in a decision making process facilitate a more effective and transparent clinician patient relationship. The active inclusion of a patient in a care processes result in the change of a traditional clinician patient relationship from one of the authority and passiveness to the more balanced partnership. Ward rounds are a most important and a common form of a teamwork in a hospital setting, which is provide a forum for reviewing and the planning of the total patient care. So, in this section we need to discuss the process of ITDR, interdisciplinary team round. So, it always started from the team formation. After forming the team, they visit to the patient bedside. So, the team of a healthcare system, they will assess the patient condition, then they will prepare the strategy or they plan the strategy, then the same thing they will communicate it with the patient. After taking the consent, they will go for the discussion point of view, and after discussion they will take a patient consent and the documentation and they will start for the further we can say based upon the progress note, they will start or they will prepare the further or a future treatment plan for the patient. So that's why there is a need for the one round participation, which efficiently include all these 7 important stages or the steps. In this section, we need to discuss medication history and the pharmaceutical care. So there are some important objectives for which we need to go for this one: to cure the disease, to eliminate or reduction of patient symptomology, and arresting or slowing the disease progression. So such kind of a care will be given for the end stage or for the tertiary care. So pharmaceutical care is nothing but it is a cooperative patient centered system for achieving the specific and positive patient outcomes from a responsible provision of the medication. So the practice of a clinical pharmacy is an essential component in the delivery of a pharmaceutical care. Basic element of the pharmaceutical care include patient oriented, both acute and chronic problems should be addressed, stress on the prevention of a drug related problem, documented system on a patient record need and the care, offering the continuous care in systematic way, take a help of other healthcare providers in integrated care providing, highly accountable and responsible way of a patient care, emphasis on optimizing the patient care and the quality of a life. Then pharmaceutical care involves the process through which and pharmacists cooperate with the patient and other professional in designing, implementing and monitoring the therapeutic. So in a dosing pattern and the drug therapy based pharmacokinetics, we need to discuss the clinical pharmacokinetics. So what body happens to the drug or what a body deals with the drug, that we need to discuss in the pharmacokinetics, which efficiently involves ADME, that is nothing but absorption, distribution, metabolism and excretion. So also we need to discuss the general application of that one, where we need to identify the time to reach a maximum response, understanding the loading dose and the dosing alteration. So dear friends, there are the different calculations which has been made for the calculating the dosing regimen for the patient, for the men, for the woman, normal men, normal woman, obese men, obese woman, or based upon the body weight surface, body surface area, we are going to calculate the dosing regimen. So here I am presenting the calculations for your references. Similarly, there are the different equations which has been used for identifying the dose based upon the surface area. So this is a calculation which is being considered as a molecular calculation. So based upon the molecular calculation, we can find out the body surface area, or we will calculate the doses of the drug based upon the body surface area, specifically for the anti-cancer or immunoglobulins. Then we need to calculate the child dose based upon the body surface area of the child and the adult dose. So these are the different calculations which has been utilized for understanding the dosing pattern and the doses calculation for for the actual drug administration to the patient. So thank you all for your patience hearing. This is all about the clinical pharmacy and significance of the clinical pharmacy. Thank you.